Okay, I think we're going to get started. First of all, thank you everyone for coming tonight. We really appreciate the turnout. My name is Andres Gavelden. I'm with the City of Fort Collins. I'm the project manager for the Comcast franchise project. We have enlisted the help of these two fine gentlemen, the Duchesnes, from Telecommunications Research Corporation. They are the consultants working with the city to do our outreach and community interest gathering. So they are going to be looking for all of your input tonight. Please speak up. Please give us as much input as you can. We're really looking forward to a good night. So Tom and Bob Duchesne, thank you very much.
And in case you have further questions, we're going to have a lot of follow-up information that they'll provide you about some written material and some surveys that'll be coming out, some other information. So I'm Carson Hamlin. I'm the franchise administrator for the city. A lot of you know me. So without further ado, Tom and Bob Duchesne.
Thank you all very much for being here this evening. We're working with the city in the cable franchise renewal process involving Comcast. We want to share some brief background with you regarding our work, and then we're going to go through some slides on the PowerPoint. Most of all, we want to hear from you this evening as far as your input and experiences with respect to Comcast. I live in Colorado Springs, just by way of background, and Bob lives in Denver. We have worked in the cable television and telecommunications area for 26 years. We've represented a lot of local governments throughout Colorado, and our work has covered about 37 states. So we have been experienced in working with cable television and telecom matters for many years. Bob and I are both attorneys as well. We came out of the University of Virginia Law School in 1978, and Colorado's been home for almost 29 years for me and over 30 years for Bob.
What we're here to do tonight is to talk about the Comcast cable franchise. The franchise was entered into in 2006. It's a non-exclusive franchise, which means that other wireline providers could choose to come into Fort Collins and provide cable TV service. The difficulty is it's extraordinarily expensive if somebody else wanted to come in and lay their own lines and wires here in the city. So under federal law, there's a process that enables the cable company to ask for a renewal of their cable TV franchise. It's called Section 626 of the Cable Act. There's an 84 Act, a 92 Act, and a 96 Act. We're not going to go into all the microscopic details and the legalities. What we are here to do is gather input from you in terms of the past performance as to how Comcast has performed throughout the term of the existing franchise, and we're here to ascertain the needs and interest on a going forward basis that the community has. We're reaching out to key stakeholders, to residents. We met with some businesses this morning. We met with some nonprofits. There's a survey going out randomly to 4,000 residents here in the city. There's going to be an opportunity for continued input with the K-12 schools and CSU coming up later this month. So we are gathering input from a number of key stakeholders in the community, and your input is very valuable in terms of telling us what it is you'd like to see, tell us what you're happy about, tell us what you're not happy about, and we want to be able to factor that in. We also want to talk to you about the access channels. We've got Carson's Channel 14, the city channel, the Poudre School District channel, CSU's channel, FC Pan's channel, and there's also an internal channel that's being used by Ames Community College at the present time. So there's a lot that goes into this process. We're going to go through the PowerPoint, and we're not going to go through every single thing on the PowerPoint or we'd be here way past the midnight hour. But we want to get you acquainted with the process, what is happening with franchises around the country, and then hear from you and ask you to please come up to the microphone and tell us why you came here tonight and why it's important for you all to be here tonight.
In that regard, I want to share with you that John Lehman is here from Comcast, and there may be a gentleman from CenturyLink, John McCormick, may be attending. There's John. Hi, John. I'm glad you're here tonight. Thank you very much for being here as well, too. So with that said, we're going to run through this quickly. Bob's mentioned the federal laws. There are a series of laws that come into play with respect to cable franchise renewals. And Bob and I have been involved in many places, many counties, many cities, in terms of negotiating on behalf with local governments, with Comcast, with other cable companies as well, Charter, Time Warner, whole host of companies. So it's a process that does take place. In some states, there are statewide laws. In Colorado, statewide franchising does not currently exist. The reason that comes into play is that where statewide franchises exist, then local governments do not negotiate and draft cable television agreements on a one-by-one basis. Our experience is, I'll share this, is that for local governments, it's for them to be able to ascertain the needs of the community and tune into those needs. It's important that they can negotiate with cable operators. It's been very helpful in that regard.
In terms of the industry, there's been a lot of change, as you all probably know. When we first got in this business, there were a lot more cable companies in this country. Now there are a handful of dominant players. Comcast has around 22 million subs. Charter is a big player. Time Warner certainly is a big player. AT&T with their Uverse platform is a big player. Verizon has become a big player. Mediacom is a sizable player. The point is that there's been a lot of consolidation in the industry. And with that in mind, the road has come to this for people. You do have choices. You don't have to be a cable TV subscriber. You could get DBS service from Dish. You could get it from DirecTV. There are choices out there. The point being, though, that there's a federal regulatory mechanism that local governments that don't have statewide franchising need to go through in terms of whether or not they're going to renew their cable franchise with the incumbent and what can be done in terms of this in the scope of those negotiations.
The world has changed, as you all know, in terms of technology. And what used to be coax systems became HFC systems, hybrid fiber coax, and of course VoIP, voice over internet protocol. There's a list of services I'm sure you all are very familiar with: HD service, video on demand, high-speed internet access, broadband communications. Under the federal law, there are distinctions between what constitutes a cable service. Although certain services are delivered over a cable platform, they are not considered to be, quote, cable services for certain purposes of federal law. So that does make a difference in terms of what local governments can and cannot do with certain protocol. IPTV, which is listed below, is a type of service which many of you, I'm sure, have heard of. It's a service which is being provided by providers around the country. CenturyLink is one of those providers. And it's a service that incorporates new technology and a new platform and newer services that can be delivered as well.
IPTV is the next generation of cable service. We were engaged to help the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico negotiate an IPTV franchise with the largest telephone company in Puerto Rico. So there are places, U.S. territories and other places in this country that are moving towards IPTV. For the purposes of the discussion tonight, this is a cable franchise. And what you all need to know, and it doesn't make any sense, even though there's one pipe and one platform, internet service over that pipe is not considered a cable service. It's an interstate information service. Phone service over Comcast system is not a cable service. This becomes important because the city is entitled as a max under federal law to 5% of the gross revenues derived from the cable company from the provision of cable services. The question has come up in the past, why can't the city get a percentage of the internet revenues? Why can't they get a percentage of the telephone revenues via cable franchise? The long and the short of it is that's not the way the law has evolved. And that's where, like it or not, that's where we are in this country at this point.
Right. However, in addition to the 5% of gross revenues, if there are needs that are ascertained and documented and supported, and if the costs are reasonable to meet those needs with respect to public, educational, and government access, there can be grants which can be given as part of the franchising renewal process, and there can be what we call PEG fees as well, too. So there are some additional components in addition to the 5%. But the question that often comes up, as Bob has mentioned, is what happens with internet revenues? Now, we want to hear about, if you have comments about broadband and internet, and you want to share those with us, we're glad to listen to those.
We are. If you get the triple play from Comcast and you're having problems with one of your services, I think Comcast would like to know that too. That'd be very helpful information.
Right. In terms of other cable franchises, it's helpful to see what's been done elsewhere. We represented Larimer County for many years. We've worked with Fort Collins actually for many years as well too. And in the course of that work, Larimer County recently completed the franchising renewal process with Comcast and with another company called Baja. The Baja systems were actually sold to a company out of Chicago called Telephone and Data Systems. But that's important because from a frame of reference standpoint, it's important to know not only what's happened in Fort Collins, but what's happening in other places, whether it's El Paso County, who we work with in the Colorado Springs area, or other jurisdictions in other states as well, too.
Here's a very quick snapshot, and it's always not a good idea to generalize, but I do want you to know in terms of other franchises around the country, the days of the 15 and 20-year franchises are gone for the most part. The cable companies don't want those long-term franchises, and because the law and the technology is changing so fast, it's not a great idea to have those lengthy franchises. PEG channels, public educational governmental access channels. Cities are negotiating for a government access channel, for a public access channel, for educational access channel. It depends on what the needs are. Your needs in Fort Collins are different than the needs in Colorado Springs or in the Seattle area where we've done a lot of work.
In addition to that, as part of this renewal process, there are multiple parts and subparts. It's important for the city to continue to keep what it has for PEG channels as well as address the needs for future PEG channels. And we appreciate you being here. It's important for us to hear, and it's important for the cable operators to know that these are important as well, too, from a viewership standpoint. We know from our experience around the country that in a lot of places, the government channels, the public access channels, the educational access channels may or may not get as much usage as they do here. These are very actively programmed channels, and it's going to be very important for the city to retain those as part of the process. That does not infer that someone doesn't want you to keep them, but what is important is we need to document those needs as part of what we're talking about.
Let me throw one other thing that may be confusing to you all. There's a thing called an INET, an institutional network, and that's part of this cable franchise. And what that is, it was envisioned as probably a fiber optic connection among city buildings and government agencies. And that's something that can be part of the negotiation in this cable franchise too. And so if there's a need for the city to communicate internally through an INET, transferring data, transferring files, saving lease line costs, saving T1 costs, that's something we want to talk to you about. So that's another component of the cable franchise renewal process.
With respect to the list that's on the slide, we want to be forward-looking, and we know that Fort Collins very much is that way too. So when we work on this process and work on this renewal, and Bob and I are part of a team of people that are working with the city and on the city's behalf in this regard, we want to focus on the educational component too. I mean, there are opportunities from an educational standpoint to provide information and dissemination to constituents. We're all very much aware of the public safety issues and the first responder issues and the natural disaster issues as well. We've had 2 fires in Colorado Springs in the last 2 years. We had Waldo Canyon. This year we had the Black Forest Fire. We've had the floods. I know that what you all, we are familiar with, what you've experienced up here. Estes Park is a client of ours, as I mentioned, Larimer County. So this is an opportunity to look at the public safety piece and see what can be done as far as the renewal and how that can enhance what's being done as far as public safety and dissemination of information to people.
Over the access channels.
Right.
And that's why the access channels have further validity and are a very important component of this process.
From an economic development standpoint, what happens is when businesses are looking to either stay where they're currently operating or to expand their operations or to move in from other parts of the country, they want to know what the infrastructure looks like, as it's so important with the schools and the roads and everything that goes into quality of life. They want to know from a telecommunications standpoint what it's going to look like for their employees if they expand their services or continue to remain in the Fort Collins area. So there's an economic development piece here too that goes beyond the revenue which is paid as part of the franchising process. And so utilization by government, by businesses, by residences, broadband infrastructure promotes growth.
We do know there's another broadband initiative being discussed here in the city. This is separate and apart from that discussion, but we do know that broadband is a term that a lot of people think about in terms of cable TV and internet and VoIP, voice over IP. And so it is something that that becomes very important, even though it's not part of this renewal process. We do know the city is actively looking in terms of what the broadband opportunities are.
Right. In a cable television franchise, typical franchise ends up being about 50 pages long, and a lot of time and effort goes into negotiating it, and there's a host of issues that are involved in there. Some of them we've included up there. We've talked about the term of the franchise briefly. We talked about the definition of gross revenues, what's included in that, upgrades of the system. Customer service is very important. And the world has changed a lot in the last 26 years since we've been involved in this. But the crux of the matter is that for companies in a competitive environment to grow, they've got to retain and add customers with customer service. And we want to hear what your input is. And again, we're looking for comments that are positive, and if there are comments that are not, we want to hear about it. And if there are opportunities for the cable operator to improve or make things better, that's helpful to know so that we can work together with them on your behalf in that regard as well, too. So in terms of the process, we need to follow federal law. As Bob mentioned, there's an existing franchise that's on the books. That franchise has a lot of detail in it. As part of this process, the team looks at the obligations in the franchise, addresses those with Comcast, addresses if there are any questions in terms of what needs to be done. Those are done as well, too. We look at other franchises all over the country. Redmond, Washington, the home of Microsoft, has been a client of ours for over 13 years, and plus or minus. And we have a good handle, as do the other members of our team, of what's been done elsewhere. Because franchises, these are not cookie-cutter agreements. Each one's different. Each one zeroes in on various factors that are important. And by bringing that national, regional, and what I call Colorado frame of reference to the process, that's helpful as well.
What I would mention is there are two of us here, but there are a team of consultants working on this renewal. There are technical consultants, there's a financial consultant, there's a PhD statistician. 4,000 surveys are going out, as I mentioned before, randomly. So there's a whole team of people working with the city. That information is being gathered, and then we will factor that in to a report which will be given to the city, and that will be used in the context of the negotiations with Comcast.
Now, this is proceeding what we call under the informal franchise renewal process. This talks about the formal franchise renewal process under federal law. For 26 years, we've told our clients, don't go there. Okay, it's very expensive, it's very time-consuming, and when you get all done with that and you spend all the time, effort, and money and the emotional aggravation, you're probably going to end up about the same place you were before. Now, there are other consultants with different views. Our view of this is that this is a partnership between the city and the cable operator, and you work together in this process. And so there are issues that do come up, yes. There's things that can be not as quickly resolved, yes. But you don't have to go in the formal renewal process.
And here's the best news. We're not going to take you down through every single step of the formal renewal process because we don't want you to be there. We want you to be in the informal process.
Right.
Why don't we do this time? Why don't we start to gather input?
Right. That's what I was going to suggest.
From audience members. Please, if you would, come up to the microphone, state your name, introduce yourself, and tell us why you're here and what's important to you about this Comcast franchise renewal process. Questions or any comments you have?
Hi, my name's Eric Sutherland. I live in Fort Collins.
Okay.
And I'm going to kind of bookend my comments this evening around the same point, and that's access for people, minimal access. Most content you can get for the least amount of price for those people on very limited budgets who look at this. And I start out with a criticism of your firm and representation of Larimer County. And the public process that was used there. Now, part of that would be the county's fault because they adhere to horrible public process standards. But I also say that it did not appear to me as though any sort of offer had been made up to the county staff to provide a low-cost service to the entire population of Larimer County. Why would that be important? Well, not long after you were there, they had another presentation about our 911 service in Larimer County, which is pretty much kind of on the far edge of excellence in terms of its operational efficiency. We spent a lot of money in it. There's a big health and safety component to that 911 and reverse 911 type functionality. But I'd say there's also the very same context of health and safety involved in making sure that people have some access to news, to weather reports, to emergency notifications through their television system. And if their only option is looking at a $50 a month cable TV, they can't have that. It's unfair. So there ought to be, at a minimum, and Fort Collins ought to set the standard as a caring community, that we have the best content that's available at the lowest price for people who just need that economy class television service. You didn't offer anything like that up for Larimer County. And I showed up just the last tail end of the whole thing to voice my objections to not including that in there. But we need that in there, and for Fort Collins, for absolute certain.
And what I'm going to suggest is that under the parameters of federal law, the cable company can offer what we call a basic tier, basic tier, like a lifeline tier. And I'm going to ask if John would be willing to do so, to indicate if Comcast has such a program, and if so, what it costs, because there are rate regulation limitations, whether it's Larimer County or Fort Collins, and I understand the frustration. But the cable company can offer a lifeline tier at a price for less channels, so people do have access to those core kind of services.
What I would add is that local governments are limited in terms of rate regulation. That's one of the biggest problems in this country. They tried to put in rate regulation on the basic tier. It was a disaster. And what happened was, because cable companies could raise their rates on what was called the expanded basic tier or the premium channels, it negated the low-cost tier. So as a practical matter, cities and counties around this country have almost non-existent authority on rate regulation. But if the cable operator is willing to work with you, we're all for it.
And here's where I'd like you to go for that.
Okay.
Colorado has the most expansive home rule powers of any of the states in 50 states of the United States. Dating back to the Progressive Era, 1900s, Article 20, Section 6 of our Constitution provides home rule municipalities like Fort Collins the most expensive powers, and I'd like to see those tested as best as possible against the corporate hierarchy that tends to establish regulations in their favor to create an environment where we can care. I was up here last night, city council meeting, talking about the fact that we don't do enough to let our citizens know that there is a rebate available for food sales tax in the city of Fort Collins. We also don't do enough to let people know that we do have a basic TV, cable TV in Fort Collins. I mean, Comcast certainly doesn't advertise it. Why should they? They're not making money off of it. But I think that has to be part and parcel of evolving this system, so that when this service does become available, and I'm really counting on you to make that happen, people know about it and they can make use of it. You know, I don't think it's going to cut into the corporate profits of Comcast. Actually, it's going to create users where they didn't have them before. And people who could not afford cable TV can now afford something that provides health and safety issues, provides some comfort of life, and those sort of issues. Now, one last thing. Fort Collins, we have a history of public power. You know, and our first really foray into data communications, high-speed data communication power access was provisioned by our municipal electricity provider and our joint action agency that provides that to us. And in that regard, we do have a very embedded characteristic of looking to government to provide these services, or at least regulate them in a full extent. And I'd really like that to be part and parcel of the conversation, to see if we can stretch things a little bit beyond where other communities gone, looking at home rule power, looking at our history of municipalization. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, can I ask if you could please share your input as far as the channel piece?
Yeah, sorry. So I'm John Lehman. I'm a Director of Government and Regulatory Affairs for Comcast, and I cover much of northern Colorado. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm very interested in listening to the concerns. And as the Dushin brothers stated, that really a lot of the constraints are under federal law and the FCC. And so that's where this balance is in the discussion when it comes to negotiating the cable franchise and a cable franchise, is it really is cable services. And, you know, as they said, it may not make sense, but that's really a federal issue. It's not an issue that we can deal with on a municipal level. The same being said is on the rate issue. So we do have basic service, and I was trying to look it up, and I didn't have. I apologize. I think it's about $21 a month or $20 a month. And I know, I mean, you have at least, I don't know, I'd have to look. Oh, okay. So there's a number of channels, and I would say, I don't know, and if somebody else knows in the audience, I can look it up, but at least probably 20 or more channels on this basic service that's at $20+ a month. But there is effective competition in Fort Collins, which is defined under federal law, meaning that the municipality doesn't have the authority to regulate our rates. So that, again, is a federal issue. It's not really an issue that we can deal with on a municipal level.
My name is Peter O'Neill. I'm a resident of Fort Collins, and I'm also vice chairman of the City Energy Board that advises City Council. And so I'm here for two reasons, I think. The first one is to encourage the city to include energy efficiency in the franchise negotiation, because I'm proud to have dumped Comcast about 1.5 years ago because of the two reasons I'm here. One is the enormous waste of energy that their cable boxes that you have to use require, and then also the pricing scheme. So on the energy, and about 2 or 3 years ago when I first got an HD box from them, I have a meter. I measured what it was. It was 20 watts when it was on and 19 watts when it was off. And I figured that cable boxes were consuming 6% of the electricity in my household. It's an enormous waste, and I know it's, the gentleman from Comcast will probably answer this, it's the way the network's architected, mostly for the convenience of the operator, not for the user, that they want this thing on all the time so that they can push out data and channel updates and scheduled updates, and then if you have the DVR version, which draws 30 watts, so they can even push programming out in anticipation of you watching it. But when you have internet streaming and so forth, I have a Roku box that draws 2 watts when it's off, and I have it on a slave switch so it goes off when my TV goes off. So I think Comcast now is offering some systems that are down to about 13 watts for the cable boxes, but that's still a horrendous amount of energy to be using constantly, and it's totally unnecessary. When you look at what the internet streaming devices can do, is that you draw, a Roku box draws a few watts when it's on, when you're actually using it, and even fewer watts when you're off, and there's really no reason why you even need to leave it in standby mode. You can totally switch it off. And there are Energy Star standards now that the government has worked on with the industry to reduce this, and I think they're up to like specs 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there's really, I think Comcast has bragged that they have, the level 2 ones, which is an almost insignificant decrease in energy. The level 3 starts to matter, and the level 4 really does have a deep sleep mode and other things that laptop computers and anything else uses. In fact, if you look at what your smartphone does, a smartphone does as much as a cable TV box does. If this drew 13 watts and I were keeping it in my pocket, I would have a very hot chest and probably a burn hole in my shirt. So it's not necessary. I'm an electrical engineer. I know the technology is there to draw much less power than these things do. And so I would ask, in a spirit of cooperation, that we express the values of this city, that we do value energy conservation, energy efficiency, reducing our carbon footprints, and that we would like Comcast to maybe use us as a demonstration city to roll out this stuff faster than they normally would to us, to get to the level 4 Energy Star specs as soon as they can, and then also to pay attention to how much energy the distribution system uses, because you look at the equipment out there on their pedestals, those are blowing fans and dissipating quite a bit of heat too. I'm not sure what the draw of the whole network is for energy. So I think this really is a big opportunity to save energy, or actually, unfortunately, when we had to roll out to HD, it was a big hidden increase in electrical consumption for households that people weren't aware of, that was being forced on them as we went from the old concept of cable-ready TVs to now you can't watch HD with just what you buy in your TV. You have to have this silly box. And if we had influence at the national level, I'd like to see it back to where I could just plug the cable or plug an Ethernet cable into my TV and watch my TV with my own equipment and not have to have this equipment that's running for the convenience of the operator rather than my convenience.
Okay, we'll share this with, there's members of our team that are on the technical side. We'll share these energy-related comments
And
with
I
them
have a
as well,
whole
too.
study I've done on this that I presented to the Energy Board and city staff.
Okay.
John had a comment?
Yeah, just some information in response to that. At the end of last year and the beginning of this year, there's been this voluntary agreement federally with the majority of all cable operators in the government called the Set-Top Box Energy Conservation Agreement. And part of that stemmed from all of this trying to get more energy efficient boxes out there. And in this voluntary agreement that we started at the beginning of this year, we all agree, so CenturyLink, AT&T, Verizon, Time Warner, everybody's part of this. And we're saying that at least 90% of all new set-top boxes bought and deployed will meet EPA Energy Star 3.0 levels. So it's there, we're working on it, we hear that, we're continuing to try to improve that and push that agreement farther. And that, I apologize, was in April, was that information that I know. So I know they've updated it and continue to try to push it to the 4.0. I don't know where it is, but I could find out more
Yeah,
information.
I'd like Fort Collins to be a demonstration city for 4.0, because that's where there's really significant power reductions. Two is meaningless. 3.3 starts to do something.
Yeah, I'd be happy to pass that along internally.
Okay, and I don't know if there's a time limit here. There's a second issue I'd like to raise.
Go ahead.
If I-
Go ahead.
Okay, and that is, I think as Eric was mentioning too, is the pricing structures are ridiculous on this. So another reason I dropped Comcast was that I had to pay more money for more channels than I wanted. In fact, for channels I don't want, there's programming I don't want to pay to be put on the air or put over the cables, and yet I have to pay this. It was up to $86 a month for pretty much basic service, and I just wasn't getting my money's worth for that. I'd rather pay by the show, which is what I do now with Amazon Video on Demand over CenturyLink. And so, yes, there is effective competition, fortunately, and over-the-air does work here quite well, and so I have an antenna to get all the broadcast stuff, including a lot of sub-channels that Comcast doesn't carry. And so, you know, I'd really like to see this go to where we can specify the channels we want, the programming we want, get a more affordable package that more meets our personal preferences and beliefs even, because, you know, some is real trash that I'm being paid to pay for its production costs with my $86 or $90 a month, and I don't want to have to do that. So we want to have more choice, I think.
Okay, thank you.
More open access on the internet part of that broadband service, because I agree, broadband is broadband. It's really, there is no difference now between phone service and cable service, except how technologically, there's just what how the operators want to restrict it. But if you just make it open internet packets and let us do what we want with it, charge us by the packet if you want, that'd be okay, but don't force us to buy a bunch of programming we don't want just to get the little that we do.
I think what we ought to do with the city, Tom, is encourage them to get to Comcast to publicize the lowest level of basic service.
Right,
So
correct.
that people know it's out there.
And that it's an
that
option.
way- And that way they'll know that it's an option.
Right, I agree.
So I'm Judy Rodriguez here in Fort Collins, and I did have what I called sub-basic, where I paid like about $24 a month, that included fees, but I got 2, 4, 7, 9, 12, 6, all the public, so I got Channel 14, CSU, all the public channels, a lot of religion and Spanish channels that I took off my system, and a few like Ion and Cartoon Network and whatever. Great for me. I don't need ESPN. I don't need movies on demand. I don't need HBO, Cinemax. I just wanted that really basic thing, and it was the wire coming out of the wall into my TV. And then one day, that didn't work, just like 2 weeks ago, didn't work. And so I called Comcast, oh, well, we changed it, and now you have to have a special plug or thing for it to come out of the wall. Well, first of all, she didn't understand why I didn't have a box. She kept asking me for the serial number on my box. And I go, I don't have a box. But anyway, so I had to go down to Comcast, and I got a box, little box. Now I have another remote. So I have a remote for my Roku and a remote for my DVD and a remote. It's like, after a week, it's like, no, I can't even do this anymore. It's too much for my $24 a month to have another box and another remote to deal with. So I would like to do what you have suggested. I would love to have National Geographic, History, BBC America. I would love that, and I would love to be able, I wouldn't mind paying for those, but I will not pay $90 a month for 20 sports channels or movie channels that are showing sub-B movies that you would never pay to watch in your life. So why am I paying for that?
Let me address that. What's happened is that we call it à la carte channels. This subject has come up for many years in terms of discussions around the country. What a lot of people would like to do, as you've expressed, is select what they want to watch, what they want to pay for it, and go with it. À la carte pricing, à la carte channels has not happened as of yet. It's something that a lot of people would be very interested in for the reasons that you're articulating. And so that's what happens at this juncture, though. It's between the customer and the cable company whether you can get a package that works for you or whether you choose to go with a direct broadcast satellite provider as well, too. So there's frustration there. I mean, we
I
hear
was
you.
told several years ago that that would never happen, the à la carte, because CBS owns all these other channels and some sports channels, and NBC owns all these sports channels, and they're not going to let you pick what you want. And so I don't know if you can get around that, but à la carte is the way to go.
It's a real problem because ultimately it's the cable company who decides how they're going to package their products, and the city can't tell them what program to carry or not carry. And for better or worse, they made a business decision that they don't want to sell channels a la carte. And so there are a lot of people with your same frustrations. I wish I could tell you there is better news on the horizon. Now, John, is there something coming that
I would just say that there's both sides to it. So there's definitely a lot of people want a la carte, want to buy the 5 channels that they would normally purchase. Sometimes that would be the same amount as the whole package, but part of the other big reason on grouping programs together is to give enough diversity of programming out there so channels then become popular. So the Food Network is the best example of this. It was packaged, and so some program there people liked, they watched. Food Network basically blew up and got very popular, and there were more shows. If you do à la carte, there are people out there that have a theory that eventually you'll come down to 10 channels because those are the only channels that are out there, and if a new channel comes along, nobody knows about it, so nobody will buy it, and so it's a diversity issue. There are other arguments you can research both for it and against it, and at the moment, I don't know anything as far as movement towards a la carte from anybody.
Okay, so first I wanted to ask, why did she have to get a box? Is that part of the franchise agreement now? Why did that change?
John,
Was the upgrade age?
We all went, so it used to be analog, and then all our systems went digital. So when we went digital, you need to have a box because it's...
You require it, but it's not.
You require it.
With a clam tuner, you can.
Correct. So originally...
Scramble.
Correct. So you either needed a box or a QAM tuner as part of your TV or a cable card. Then the FCC in October issued a ruling saying that you can encrypt your basic channels. And so what Comcast has done in some communities has begun and will do throughout is encrypting their channels so that you will need the box. A lot of the reason behind that is security of the system to make sure there isn't breaches of that security.
So if Comcast wants to compete in the current television movie market, I would recommend that you have a low-cost option for people to get their local channels, because you're going to have to fight for the movie market. You got Hulu, Netflix, Instant Watch. We have Netflix Instant Watch. I have 2 teenage sons. They watch Hulu. That's the way it's going, and you know that. But I would like to have my local channels. I do contract work for FCPAN. I've worked for FCPAN. I've had my own stuff on the channel, and I did have it for $12 for a while. It was great, and then one month my bill went up to $25 with no explanation. And they said, when I called, they said my promotion ended. So I got mad and I said, forget it. So I don't even, see my own stuff. And many people who already pay for, even for Dish a lot of times, if they could have a $15, $16 option, no more than that they could get their local stations so they could see their government stations and they could see their public access stations, they would do it. They would do it in addition to Netflix Instant Watch, which is $8 a month, something like that. They would do it in addition to their movie channels, and that could be a really big share that Comcast could have that right now they're being left out of because it's $25 a month, and nobody wants to pay an extra $25 on top of whatever, their Amazon On Demand or wherever they're getting their movies. So, that would just be my suggestion.
Thank you very much.
I'm Chanel Sedgwick. I'm the board president of Fort Collins Public Access Network here in Fort Collins. And I've just come up tonight to speak mainly in support of the public access channels.
Okay.
We are the P in the PEG entities, the public piece. There's also education and government, and I know you'll be meeting with those guys later to discuss their pieces of this whole franchise agreement. But I do know that as a public entity, we sort of sit out there and our necks are always a little bit on the chopping block. So I wanted to make sure that I came here and spoke in support of retaining a public channel that is accessible to all citizens of Fort Collins to come, and they can rent our equipment, they can be trained by us, they can produce with us, they can meet other producers. We've single-handedly been supporting the local filmmakers groups in the areas and helping train. We've been working with teens in the community. We have an enormous coalition with many nonprofits in the area who could not otherwise pay for the corporate media and the type of advertising that comes along with that. Also, we work as a community calendar, and we serve, I could go on and on because I love our channel so much. But basically, I just wanted to say that I'm here in support of that. Also, when we talked to members of our community about the fact that we were having a meeting tonight, many people submitted written comments about supporting Fort Collins Public Access Network. Okay. I'd like to also provide those for you. Please. One is from Mike Engstad and also from Cassandra Sitterly, so okay. I will also leave those with you.
Thank you.
They're written comments. But other than that, I just wanted to end with that we are the only providers of that at Fort Collins Access Network, and we have big ideas for the future. And if the franchise agreement is being negotiated in a way that supports our station and then helps continue the development of our station and takes us into the 21st century, the 22nd century, and continuing on and modernizing our technology for as long as it's going to last, then we will have something incredibly viable in Fort Collins that we can continue to be proud of as we go on. And when the basic package is negotiated, making sure that the public access channels are part of those channels and not some sort of strange drop-down menu over to the side, which I know you guys know what I'm talking about because AT&T is doing that nationwide.
Right.
And just solidifying that before we decide to go with Comcast as our provider or to continue what we're doing with them. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Can we take the comments?
Great,
Thank you very much.
What Chanel's referring to, is that it's very important that the public educational and governmental channels remain on the basic tier. What's happened in other jurisdictions around the country with other providers, in some cases, is that the channels are moved up to the higher level numbers. They're not as accessible, they're tougher to find, there can be cost involved in terms of watching those channels, and this is a very important piece as far as keeping public access, government access, and educational access on the basic tier. Other systems elsewhere, the drop-down menu, basically what happens is in some cases, the PEG channels have been squeezed into one channel, so you've got to go up higher on the numbers. You come over, you push it, and there's a drop-down menu. Now, in terms of finding those channels, now, there's a difference, though. I want you all to know there's a difference between what cable companies have done and what has been done on the IPTV systems in this regard, because in the IPTV systems, we've had those discussions, and they are very mindful of the fact that they want to be able to provide those channels in a format where you get really good signal quality and it works, as opposed to having signal degradation issues. So you can't just generalize one operator to the other here. It does make a difference in terms of how those are handled.
The point being, though, that people want they want to get the over-the-air broadcast signals, the CBSs, the ABCs, the NBCs, and the PEG channels in the lowest tier package, the least expensive package, a basic, what we used to call a lifeline package. When we got in this business, it was about $12, from what I recall, $12.95. And that's what people got. They got CBS and ABC and NBC and the PEG channels and maybe a couple more. And what I'm hearing tonight from a number of people is that worked before. Why not make that option available? And this it's good for the citizenry, and it may be great for Comcast too, or whoever, in terms of marketing. You may pick up more subscribers.
Yeah, and what I will share with you is that in terms of the drop-down piece, because I've had this discussion with another company as well, and that company has shared with me that they have solved the problems that other companies have had. Just having drop-down menu on that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's got to be done in the right way that it works. So there is another company I know of that has worked to solve that very issue.
Hi, my name is Helene Stout. I'm a Fort Collins resident, and I have really more questions than anything else. So I don't have cable TV because I refuse to pay for commercials. It's just personal. When TV went from analog to digital, we went from not paying for commercials other than buying product to now we pay for commercials. The programming, in my opinion, on the cable stations is awful. So I've just chosen to make my own stand, and I just don't have cable TV. So my husband's not very happy about that, but okay. I wondered, though, in watching your presentation, how you plan to address the public safety issues for people who, like myself, choose to not participate in the marketing ploy and the overpriced TV that we now are expected to watch. With the recent flooding and rains that we've had, I don't have cable TV. I don't have access to any of that. And on a rainy day, like we recently had, I don't really get much reception other than a lot of crackling and in and out. So you catch a little glimpse here and there, but not worth watching. So I wonder how you'll address, there is still going to be some, I hope, population in Fort Collins, Larimer County that stand up and say, this is ridiculous. I can't afford $70 a month to watch commercials and then buy product on top of it, so I choose to party out. I completely agree with the a la carte channels. 10 channels for $10, period, end of discussion, would be the way to go, and they'd probably have more participation. Prior to digital, all of this was free, and now we're suffering through more expenses. My income hasn't kept pace with the increases in just TV. I have succumbed to paying for Comcast for cable internet, and I have watched that skyrocket over the 7 years that I've had access. For a year, Comcast charged me for cable TV on my bill without me even knowing it, because my business pays for my internet access so I can work from home. And it took me 4 months to get that undone, which until I wrote a letter to the FCC, I don't think it would have even gotten undone. So I'm concerned about the price of programming, the quality of programming, and for those of us that don't want to participate and pay to watch TV, I'd rather be outside, how do we address the public safety issues? The reason that I'm here tonight is because I don't get this channel at home. So I couldn't stay with my company and my husband at home and watch from home, so I had to come down. Not necessarily a bad thing, but I just wonder how you're going to address that.
Well, that's a very challenging question. I mean, because the question is how does the how do the notices get to you as far as public safety? Whether it's through reverse 911 on a phone situation. If you don't, obviously, if you don't have cable TV, you're not going to see the city channel. You're not going to see the crawl that talks about how this is going to happen. You know, from a radio standpoint, that's not part of this process, but obviously there's, you know, emergency broadcast that comes on the radio.
But that's, I don't know if we have an easy answer for you on that one.
I would suggest we talk to people on the emergency management side and see what their thoughts are.
My concern is it forces everybody to have cable that maybe can't afford it or don't want it.
Right. No, we understand your concern on that. So how do the emergency notices get disseminated to those that don't have this? Why don't we talk with the city about that and see what their thoughts
In
are?
the analog world, it worked.
Right.
And it's just
So-
now that it doesn't.
Yeah.
We will talk with the city's emergency management.
Right.
folks.
Yeah, and see what they say.
And then what I hear you guys say is you can't do anything about cost as a city. So why does competition not participate in the cost functionality? And if the competition isn't there and Comcast has all the business, then why isn't volume driving discount?
No, that's an excellent question. If you've got two DBS providers, Dish and you've got DirecTV, and you have Comcast, and you have these other technologies, why haven't the prices come down? Again,
There's not an easy answer for that. Logic says they should come down. In markets where other wireline providers have gone head-to-head, then there can be a reduction in the pricing. It's very expensive for another company to go ahead and start from scratch if they were going to build Fort Collins. Okay? Conversely, if they were to come into Fort Collins, what we've seen elsewhere in other cities is that the local incumbent provider, whether it's Comcast or others, they want the new provider to build out as much of the city and as quickly as possible to try to level the playing field. This is not an easy balance in terms of what's there. It can happen. CenturyLink is in Colorado Springs. They're in El Paso County. Right, and so, I mean, that's an example where competition is underway in Colorado Springs. It takes a major capital investment for a company to make that decision, and there are a lot of, and again, we're not playing favorites on this between Comcast or CenturyLink or other providers. The reality is if you have competition, then prices should go down, and services.
but what you're asking, which is an excellent question, is why haven't they gone down?
Right.
There's this competition, and I don't know if there's an answer to
The
that.
cable itself is owned by Comcast?
The infrastructure.
The
Infrastructure.
Yes,
infrastructure.
correct. Uh-huh.
And so for another company to come in and compete would require them laying the same cable over the existing cable?
Or they could, if they had infrastructure in place, that, for instance, if a telephone company, whether it's Fort Collins or another city, if they have infrastructure in place, although work and a lot of money has to be spent to do so, they can, in some cases, work from that infrastructure to create the platform to provide video service. But that's a business decision for that company.
But otherwise, it's an overlay, a duplication of cable,
Right.
more copper,
Right,
more
and-
wire,
and,
whatever.
and so what we
Right.
call overbuild situations back in the days, historically there have been some, there have not been a lot, but now some companies like Verizon has gotten into the video business, although they're selling a lot of this. AT&T's getting in, CenturyLink is getting as well, so there are more companies now than even just in the last few years. So,
Okay.
and then there are pluses that go with that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Thank
so you
you.
guys know, internet now is like $70 a month just to have the internet, no TV, no channels with Comcast.
Hi, guys. Thanks for coming up here.
You bet.
My name is Andrew Schneider, and I'm a resident of Fort Collins, and I'm a local filmmaker, as well as a board member of FCPAN.
Okay.
And there are just a few things that I wanted to address, and I won't take much time, hopefully. One of them is our PEG funds. And there are some national conversations going on about how those funds are used and what we can use them for, what other markets use them for. And we see other communities in this country that are far more progressive in what they're allowed to do with that. And it's a real pinch point for us here in Fort Collins. The PEG funds that we can use for equipment are great, and they provide us ample equipment that we make great use of. But that doesn't address all of our needs as FCPAN. For example, we don't have any agreement within the franchise for funding positions such as a director.
Right.
We don't have any of those sorts of expenses. It's also unfortunate that this franchise renegotiation is happening now, sort of on a bad timing with the city budget process, because we would like to address a way that is more fair to the PEG entities than having our franchise funds go into the general fund for the city and then be dispersed out. I don't have any proof necessarily, but there's just sort of a feeling that this money's going into the general fund and then sort of goes elsewhere besides FC-PAN. So I think that we would like to see, in the spirit of sort of working with Comcast, who's been great enough to provide us with cable here, and I grew up in a television house and love television, with a grant or with the ability to use our PEG funds to fund more than just our equipment. And I think it would provide Fort Collins with some of the resources that we need. This is my next point. As an independent content maker, and as somebody who works with students here to try and create a new generation of television makers and people who create local content from Fort Collins that speaks to our culture, so that our community can see our values together and create a dialogue through our public access, which is kind of what, in my opinion, the thing is built for to begin with, is to have this exchange and the access to it. We are limited in what we can do content-wise by not being able to sort of use these funds in the way that other cities and towns, and even down in Denver. We're also limited by the amount that we're taking in these PEG funds and the fees that come off of a bill. So if you look in Denver, for example, or even down in Springs, they're taking quite a bit more than they are up here in Fort Collins. And I would like to have this franchise renegotiation really look at, should we raise those levels now? And I definitely think that we should. I don't think that it creates any additional burden for Comcast, and I think that it only helps to enrich the PEG entities here in town. Just one last point that I wanted to make, which is, I'm not sure if anyone is here to speak to the educational channels as well, but I think that there is they face some of the same needs that we have, such as the ability to use PEG funds on projects that are not for cable. So, for example, obviously the internet is huge now, and a lot of people get their content on the internet. For us to duplicate our content onto the internet, we run into problems using equipment to do web-only content, for example, or to stream online. Here in Fort Collins, we also have a unique problem that our servers at FC-PAN are behind the city's firewall. And that means that if you go to our website, you can't see the month's schedule. You can only see the day's schedule, because we cannot do the exchange that needs to happen on the programming website level that allows it to be responsive back and forth to the end user, because we are behind this firewall. Well, why can't we get out from behind the firewall? Well, because we cannot get the PEG funds from the city to put a server on our own system outside of that to support our internet streaming. So I think that for us to move into sort of the future and to have a much more healthy, viable public access network here, we need to work with Comcast to create something that will allow us, first of all, to use funds for some positions and some more stuff besides equipment, and then to help us be able to make our channel available outside of Comcast channels. Thanks.
Thank you. Let me address a couple of your concerns. For some of you may know this, some of you may not. The city gets 5% of the gross revenues for franchise fees. Those funds can be used for whatever the city wants to use them for, be it roads, public safety, PEG access. There's also a separate, my recollection is 50 cents a month per subscriber requirement in the franchise. You would need to work with the city to see how those funds are divvied up between public access, educational access, and governmental access, okay? If those funds are used for capital, they don't count against the franchise fees. If those funds are used for operations purposes, support positions, unfortunately, the way the law has been interpreted, that those monies could be used as a deduction from the franchise fees. So the way to increase the amount of funding you want to get is, one, either get a higher PEG fee, negotiate a higher PEG fee this time around, or secondly, go to the city and see if they're willing to allocate some of the money out of the 5% franchise fees, because those are not restricted in terms of capital or for operational purposes.
Right, with respect, even if the PEG fee goes up, and we've had this issue come up in many places around the country, the PEG fees cannot be used for staffing, because otherwise, as Bob's indicated, there can either be an offset against franchise fees, or potentially the cable operator could seek reimbursement for those. So the question really becomes, not for equipment purposes. For equipment purposes, the PEG money can be used for equipment. So it really comes down to, as between the public access providers and the educational providers, and then taking into account the government channel, which takes a lot to run and operate too, of the 5% of gross revenues, what is the city going to work out as far as allocating that with you? And that's to keep this, from the standpoint of federal law, that way you don't have a problem with the cable operator later. So we hear your concern. There is this federal law interpretation restriction, so you all would need to work with the city for money that comes that would otherwise go in the general fund to head your way if you want to. And so that's really between you all and the city to work that out. We understand what you're saying.
And we're lucky enough here to have Carson, who's one of the best informed and highest producing, franchise managers in the country, I would imagine.
Yes. Carson's great.
At the same time, we don't get to speak directly to the consultants who do work in multiple states around the country.
Right.
And to be able to speak up and say to the city, we would like to be leading as opposed to following what's going on in other places. And we would like to have a public access channel that is thriving as opposed to asking people to do things at cut rates and for free.
Sure.
We would like to improve that situation.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you this is very important. Thank you for being here, sharing that.
Oh, good evening.
Hi, my name's Natalie, and my greatest issue with Comcast has to do with customer service.
Okay.
One thing that is frustrating is we've noticed that our bill changes every month. Not necessarily every month, but it has multiple times, even though our service hasn't changed. And so I found that we've had to go through our bill with a fine-tooth comb and find like the Spanish channel or other channels that have been added on without our request that we are being charged for. Eventually my roommates and I decided to get rid of TV altogether just because we were tired of dealing with this issue. And so we went just to internet, and so we believed that this would be our first time without having any issues with our billing. And we had one roommate who moved out, and it was under her name originally. And since she moved out, we had to close her account and put it under my name. We did that on the exact same day at the exact same time on July 25th. And last week, our roommate was called by collections saying that she owed $158.46, and if she didn't pay it by that day, they were going to take her to collections. And I don't even know what this did to her credit. I'm not sure if it appeared on her credit report, but it was a bullying threat for a bill that we did pay, and that we actually resolved this the month earlier, because originally they were trying to charge us twice for that. This is our roommate who moved out. I'm sorry, it's hard to follow.
No, but
the
here's
story.
my suggestion. I mean, and John and Comcast are great to work with on this. If you could give John your name and address, and he can check into that account and see what's going, and see what happened. And so,
See if we can get some resolution.
right, so you don't get some collection agency calling you, about this.
I understand, and I would like to speak with you, but more importantly, I would like to say that both of my roommates and myself have been dealing with Comcast. I can't even count how many hours I have spent with Comcast on this particular issue, and not just myself, but both of my roommates, trying to resolve this. We have taken in our checks that that show that we have paid this, and I guess the greatest problem here is because of the lack of competition, they don't have the same accountability that they would if they had that competition. And I need to get this resolved before I can even leave Comcast, because we don't even have to be with them anymore now that we're just doing internet. But the issue is they always apologize, but they don't take responsibility. And as for something that can be improved on, I found that they don't listen. I'll be explaining the issue, and they'll just start back up with the same speech when it's clear that they didn't hear me at all. So I think that's something that can be greatly improved upon.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Good evening.
I'm Alexis Milak, and I'm on the board of FCPAN.
Okay.
And I have a couple questions, and for you to clarify if you could.
Sure.
At the beginning, I was unclear when you talked about maybe a legal loophole of what is cable and what is informational services. Are we talking about cable here with Comcast?
We're talking about cable, and it's not a loophole. It's a definitional piece. What happens is that local governments around the country, understandably, because internet service is carried on the same platform, the pipe, that cable companies often provide voice, video, and data.
Okay.
All one system. But local governments, because of an interpretation and case law, are not able to collect a percentage of gross revenues as a franchise fee with respect to the internet service.
Okay.
So it's not a loophole. It's something that's gone before the FCC and through the court system, and that's the way it's been interpreted. It doesn't make any sense, because if it comes out over the cable platform, how come it's not a cable service, but it just isn't? So that's that piece.
Okay, so this is straightforward.
This is cable.
Franchise.
Yes, this is a focus on cable, correct. Yeah.
And could you explain why public access channels are part of the franchise structure?
Sure. What happens is that under federal law and the Federal Cable Act, there are specific provisions that provide that as part of a cable operator seeking to either obtain a franchise or renew one, that public, educational, and governmental channels can be included as part of the negotiation to the extent there is a need for those. So, in this case, there is. I mean, you all are.
So the need is to serve the public interest or the public.
That's correct. It's a forum. It's a forum for the public to have an opportunity to present.
Okay.
And it's actually a good thing, because what you want is embodied in the franchise agreement that there will be a public access channel, and there'll be there'll be a Poudre School District channel, and a CSU channel, and a government channel.
Right.
And
So
there's
these
also
are the good and noble things that the cable company does for the community.
that.
And so the channels that we have, the PEG channels, us
Yes.
being the public, then to help support us more, to serve the public, granted the airways by them, then it would be nice to have them support us more. I'm not sure if I'm
Economically.
economically, and also when you finish your inquiries to the public, and you'll see that, as it's been explained several times here, that Fort Collins is kind of unique, and we like our city, and we like what we do, and we like the arts, and we like a lot of things, and we aren't able to really communicate them well unless it's through a public access station. And so we stand ready to help nonprofits, to help events, to help local issues. And one last thing is that, just to support what people had said about your Lifeline service,
Yes.
I think if Comcast really looked at the economic structure of Fort Collins, they would see that there's kind of an untapped market in the lower structure, because economically, there is a lower economic structure in Fort Collins. And those people do not have access to public events or public service unless they have Comcast at a higher rate. And as people were saying, 10, 12 bucks or 15 or whatever would help them be with safety, with, with the arts, with notices and things like that. So I would also support that lower rate structure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Eddie Arthur. I'm on the board of FCPAN as well and Assistant Program Director. And I just want to make a pitch for public access.
Okay.
Am I talking into the camera? Fort Collins does have a public access station, and it's on Channel 96. It used, or 97. It used to be on Channel 22, and then for some reason Comcast moved us to 97, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. They told us it was because they were testing, or there was technical issues. Well, 22 now is a Spanish station, I believe, which is fine, except that it's not local, and that would have been a great station for us. It was a great station. And, that kind of move is a big pain in the butt, and any viewers that we do have, or did have, kind of got lost a little bit in the move. But back to public access. Public access is a great thing for a community because it gives anyone, regardless of how much they make or what kind of bizarre ideas they have, access to the airwaves. And for no money, you can come down and get trained on equipment and make your own video and have your own voice, and you don't have to tune into Channel 9. You can create your own news. And that is something that's taking hits all around the country. That kind of access just exists less and less. It does move to YouTube, but YouTube is sort of a different animal. It doesn't have the same viewership as television does. And so it's important, I think, to keep public access strong. And if you are a nonprofit and you would like to make videos that represent your organization, you can come to a public access station and make those videos for next to nothing. And so I encourage anyone in Fort Collins who wants to do that to come down to Channel 97. And our website is fcpan.org, and you can find out more information.
You make a great point. When we were with the nonprofits today, we encouraged some of them to avail themselves of your public access channel. Right. So we're talking the same thing here. We said to the nonprofits, this is your opportunity to work with people in this community and work with people at your channel. Yeah. So that's great. And, if I could say one thing, what would help, I'm not telling you all what to do, but if you, and maybe you already have done this, but if you can help us get the word out to the nonprofits. We tried to do it today. If you could get the word out to the nonprofits so they know that there is a place where they can go to promote their organizations, that would be tremendous.
Sure, and that's our goal. Always our goal is to let the nonprofits know, how simple it is to come down and instead of paying thousands of dollars to have a promotional video, you can do it for next to nothing. And anyone, really, who wants to say something. That access is there, and, it's always a struggle to put the word out. You need money to do that, and resources, and, when you get moved, when your whole TV station gets moved, it hurts. It's not good at all.
Here's one thing that I would suggest for the negotiating team is what we've seen in other franchises, what we've done elsewhere, is if there's a movement of an access channel, that there's something in the franchise where the cable company agrees to pay something for the rebranding of the channel.
Sure.
And that's a good thing to put in the next franchise agreement.
And that did occur. And to be fair to Comcast, they did provide some marketing money for, it was for envelopes and that kind of thing. But just the move alone was, and then the second part of it is that if you have basic cable in Fort Collins, it used to be that as you flipped through the stations, you only hit the ones that you received. That was part of your basic package. Now, it got changed so that as you're flipping through the stations, you go from 22, and then there's this big void of stations that you don't get.
Right.
And you don't know
I see what you're
if
saying.
there's one, a sweet channel in there that you're missing, but you have to click all the way through to get back to 96, which is the next station, and then 97, which is us.
To be on the basic tier?
Right. And that is a huge obstacle. I mean, who wants to go through, I don't know how many hundreds of channels there are, but, to find which stations you actually get. It's a big pain in the butt. So that was a huge obstacle to us, for people who get us on the basic tier.
Sure.
Another thing I wanted to ask about, so this is about internet, Comcast Internet as well, or no?
Well, it's the cable, in terms of the cable franchise, it's confined to cable services. As a practical matter, we're here also to hear if you're having problems with your internet service or your telephone service, but that's not part of the cable franchise negotiation.
Sure. Okay, well, I'm here to tell you about a problem.
Okay?
My business is that I repair computers for a living. To be fair to Comcast, they do have the most reliable internet signal, between them and CenturyLink. However, there's a scam going on right now, and it's absolutely a scam. I would call it fraud as well, which is that when a Comcast subscriber calls their Comcast tech support number, they expect to get somebody who's not going to rip them off, and because they've paid for that service, it's not just some number they've pulled out of anywhere. And what I've been hearing from my customers in the last 3 or 4 months is that they will call Comcast tech support if Comcast decides that the problem that they're having is not on Comcast's, it's not their fault with the internet connection or something like that. They will sometimes, I don't know how much this is happening, but I know of exact instances that it's happened, they will take advantage of less savvy computer people and say, the problem was with your computer, and you need to call your computer manufacturer. And it just so happens we've got their number here. And they give this number out, it's an 800 number, and it goes to a third-party tech support service, which has been putting, that essentially becomes a sales pitch at that point. And they will then install this product called My Tech Help Antivirus with Registry Cleaner. Well, being in the business and having fixed the people's computers that this happened to, I know that that program is essentially a virus. It's just like one of those viruses that all of a sudden pop up on your computer and say, you now have 1,000 infections, and if you don't pay us now, you'll die. And they scare people, and that's something that has been happening in the last 3 or 4 months. With Comcast, I've had customers who've I told them to call Comcast and ask for their money back and tell them exactly what happened and complain, and they got refunds for this. Anyway, it's a horrible scam, and I think Comcast should be ashamed of that type of tech support. I don't know if it's still occurring in the last month, but it was a few months ago. And that's it. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Sidna Rashid, and I'm a resident of Fort Collins, and I'm a volunteer with the FC-PAN, although I am not a board member. And I just wanted to come up here after hearing everyone speak and urge the city of Fort Collins to please provide enough funding for an employee or an intern or someone. It would make the operations at FC-PAN for the volunteers so much easier. And I want to applaud Comcast and the city for providing a public access network, because we have been able to film a lot of the programs that nonprofits that I'm a member of have broadcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I just forgot one last thing. I'd like to hear if Comcast has an answer or has heard about that tech support issue that...
I'm sorry, I have not heard about that yet, so thank you for sharing, because I'll inquire internally to see, because I agree with you, that's horrible. So hopefully we're not doing it and it's not on purpose, and maybe it was a rogue employee or something that happened, but I will definitely look into it and see what we can find out.
Good evening.
I'm Brendan Gallagher, and I teach video production classes at Fossil Ridge High School.
Okay.
And I wanted to talk about a couple of complex issues. Right now, we recognize, and several people have spoken to, the fact that we're in the middle of a transition of some sorts between a lot of online programming and a lot of cable programming. And everybody's accessing their media in multiple ways. And I think as we discuss what the future looks like within education programming and within FCPAN, which it provides an amazing service, that we also address that very specifically. I think it's important that we echo the value of democratic principles and civic pride that are essential to both educating students in video production and providing the outlet of FCPAN that allows us to give each individual a voice and an intelligent voice online. So it's not what we see on YouTube, which is anybody with a camera or some sort of a webcam, but it is instead an informed population that FCPAN provides the training for, or within the Poudre School District, we're providing the educational experience for the students. What I would really love to see develop within this franchise agreement is not just how can we make better connections to the schools, which is absolutely invaluable, but also how can we provide the equipment support and, if possible, the training support to really develop top-tier broadcast education. Because we're developing relationships within my program with a lot of different community partnerships, groups throughout the whole county. And the students are using a lot of outdated analog equipment. So in the middle of this transition to both broadcast and online media, and this transition from analog broadcast to digital broadcast, the school system just isn't capable of providing that level of equipment that's necessary to really teach the students what they need to know. So I would really love it if we could negotiate something that even as one common resource that was shared throughout the district, but something that could go to each of the schools, something that could be checked out, some sort of system that each student could be trained on, so that we're really developing that democratic voice. Because if we recognize that as a common value and something that we want to uphold, then I want to see not just here's a piece of equipment, but also here's support behind that. We're not just connecting you to the pipe, we're also giving you the equipment that you need to run a high-quality broadcast production on that. And what I would really love is if we could develop a partnership with Comcast so that the students were continuing in some sort of school-to-career path to intern with you guys, to work with you, and let's strengthen the bond of that partnership. Let's not make it about what we want and what we hope for, but instead how we can benefit together. And FCPAN can get what they need, Poudre School District gets what they need, and Comcast benefits from it as well.
Sure, that's great.
Thank you.
We have worked with, for 15 years, the K through 12 school districts in Colorado Springs, districts 2, 11, 12, 20, and 49 on the video production side. So we're very attuned to what you're saying, and they're great partnerships and great opportunities that can come forth.
I would just say, please contact me directly. We can talk about outside of the franchise, not related to a franchise, but we're big community investment partners. We do a variety of programs, one of which is called Internet Essentials, so it's broadband internet to low-income households. Huge program, $10 a month for the education life of a child to have basic broadband internet, which is now 5 megabit download speed. So there's a lot of things we're doing. We're involved in Poudre Valley School Districts and other things. So feel free, after this we can talk. I can put you in touch with some of our community investment people and we can see what's out there.
Also, when we were in the focus group for the nonprofits today, United Way, the representative also shared a similar comment with respect to the Internet Essentials program, and I want to share that with you as well, John, because they feel there are a lot of people that they could reach out to benefit from the program Comcast has on the broadband side to provide internet service at a low cost to families that have free and reduced lunch programs and qualify from a socioeconomic standpoint. So there are great opportunities there as well to partner with Comcast and help bridge the digital divide.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us come here and speak to you. My name is Susie Riding. I work for the City of Fort Collins Natural Areas Department in Visitor Information Services. I'm also on a few historical committees. One of them is the Cemetery Stroll Committee. It's the largest living history. We provide the largest living history event in northern Colorado. It was just this last September. It's run by volunteers. All of the proceeds go to support the City of Fort Collins Senior Center and senior resources. We've been doing this for years, but the last 2 years, we've invited FCPAN, specifically Alexis, thank you, to come film it and to provide marketing and advertisement for it. We're very honored and privileged to work with Alexis. She's absolutely wonderful, and she exhibits just as much passion to giving back to the community as our volunteers do. And I have to tell you, the last 2 years that FCPAN has been involved, we've had the largest turnout to the cemetery stroll that we've ever had in our history. And all of those funds went back into the community and back to senior resources. So I just want to give huge support to FCPAN for that. Thank you so much, you guys. And I don't have TV either. So I also do support those folks who have kind of asked for or have wanted a $15 because I do go to the internet as well, but unfortunately I can't watch the cemetery stroll and I can't see other things that I'm involved with because I don't have public access network. So I'm pushing for that as well. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Nancy York, a citizen of Fort Collins, and really I came here for two primary reasons. One is just to see what's up with the franchise negotiation and hoping for something more expansive and better. But the other was to support FCPAN and wanting to ensure that it is not in any way threatened with removal. I personally have given up on Comcast because of the service. So I use an old antenna to get my TV, and I can stream Fort Collins City Council meetings, and perhaps this could be streamed now. I'm not sure, but I can't stream FCPAN, and it would be really wonderful to have access to it just from my computer. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Carson, what's the city, as far as streaming goes and meetings, generally, from an overview standpoint, how does that work as far as what the city's able to do?
So the city streams city meetings.
Okay.
We stream those live. We also stream them video on demand. FCPAN has playback equipment to play back the system. They're programming over the cable system, but I don't think currently they have streaming equipment in place to stream their programming.
So, thanks a lot, guys. You're an hour and a half on your feet already.
That's okay.
So I really appreciate it. This is the best that I've ever seen community input taken by the city of Fort Collins, and I really
good.
appreciate the format that you're using and the answers here. And I would really like to know where this is going after this. I mean, there is a certain point, and I've seen this happen before. A lot of input gets taken, then it kind of drops into a bucket, and the city goes off and does whatever it wants. And it kind of closes out the rest of the public input process. So I'm really interested in understanding what sort of process you've set up so far, where this is headed. We used to have a telecommunications board in this town.
Right.
It was abandoned not even so long ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, like that. And they used to at least administer that from a citizen perspective. And so you've heard a lot this evening from people who do really kind of expect a little bit of innovation here in Fort Collins. So that message comes clear. And sometimes we're promised innovation and it doesn't come forward from the city. And I'd really like to know, how can we kind of continue to drive that process, innovation from the public standpoint?
I believe the question was around the process that we're going through with regards to their negotiation. Yeah. It's actually a 2-year process to renew the licensing if we choose to renew. We're about 3 months into it right now. The first 6 months is going to be community outreach, reviewing the financials, reviewing their past performance for technical and engineering performance, that type of thing. That'll take us through the end of this year. Q1 of 2014 will be the first time we actually start the negotiations for a potential new franchise agreement. That's expected to take all of 2014. The Q1 of 2015, March, I believe, is the official renewal date, if I remember right. And maybe John can actually correct me on that. Yeah, is that true? Yeah. So it's about March of 2015 is expected to be the potential signing of a new franchise agreement.
What I would suggest, what we will do is we're going to take findings. There'll be other people on the team who are doing other aspects of the needs ascertainment process. We're going to put this into a report. We're going to give this to the city. The city's negotiator will then negotiate with Comcast for a new franchise agreement. In the meantime, what I would suggest is that the city get with Comcast and see what can be done to implement some of these great suggestions that we've heard tonight, so that it's not, so even though the process is ongoing, there's some real quantifiable needs that have been asked for here, and frankly, in a spirit of cooperation, hopefully someone from the city or ourselves or whomever the city wants to designate can sit down with John and see what we can do to get some of these things,
To get some traction on
to get some
something that we've
traction,
heard tonight.
to have results, not just discussions, but to see what we can do to implement some of these things. That's what I would like to see happen.
Right. So along the continuum, there can be steps that can be taken even before the whole process is concluded.
So my name is Chris Winslow, and I'm on the board of FCPAN as well.
Okay.
I was curious if the numbers are available for availability of service throughout Fort Collins, percentage-wise. So you have a population of, say, 150,000.
Mhm.
What percentage actually receives the service of Comcasters within, do you have?
So there, under the franchise, there's a density requirement, which basically means we are required to build everywhere in the city as long as it's dense enough. And there's a formula, and we can go into that if you're interested. But we have approximately, I believe, 31,000 cable subscribers within the city of Fort Collins.
Is that part of an infrastructure, or part of the agreement to expand infrastructure to make it available to more people? Is that a negotiating, is it something that's negotiable, or is that kind of set a governmental?
John, you want to go ahead first?
I mean, we can definitely talk about it. It's pretty standard, and depending on the cities, so it's either 25 residents per 1 mile of cable line, or 35 residents per 1 mile of cable line, and I would need to look up what exactly Fort Collins is. So meaning, within 1 mile of doing your cable out, there's 25 households. So if it meets that, then we're required to build.
The answer is it is negotiable, and it depends what number gets plugged into the franchise in terms of how many homes per mile need to be able to be served, such that Comcast will be obligated to provide the service to them. So that's it's called a density clause, and that's part of the negotiation.
And I would just say, please let me know if there's a certain area that you feel needs to be served that isn't, because we can look into it. I can get our technical people to see why, if we're not there, maybe we are there. If we're not there, why we're not there, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. And my only other thing was that just giving more solidity to the idea of stemming of creativity. This is a really creative town. We have a lot of festivals. We have a lot of, people want to have fun, but there are a lot of really unique events that go on. And I feel that having access to video equipment can actually change the lives of even the youth, give them an experience, especially dealing with public access in an area that they may not have otherwise, because equipment is expensive and everything else. And that, in a lot of districts, educationally, the arts can take a hit when it comes to budgeting. So just to kind of hear those words as well, just that it really does help further the creativity of the youth of, my generation, of other generations as well, so. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is it also possible to get our viewership stats? So we know what our viewership is, so when we go for grants and we go for any funding, then we can tell the folks, how many people are watching.
I will double check. I don't think we have those. I don't think we track that, but I will double check and make sure that's accurate.
Okay, all right, because that would
And
be
if we
very
do, yes,
helpful.
I mean, if we can and we can disclose it, I will definitely do that. But I think, because this has come up before, and I don't think we have those numbers.
Well, advertisers need to know that for any program. What is your viewership? And that's what their rates are based on. So we obviously are not for profit, but if we could have those statistics, it would help us financially to get grants and support.
Yeah, I will see
Okay,
if I can
thank
find
you.
that information.
So I think both of those things need to happen. FC-PAN needs more of a share of the pie, more of the PEG funds, and part of that going to an operating budget, because FC-PAN is stuck, and I think has been for years. And it's not because the board isn't working their butt off, because they're collective butts, because they really are. And it's almost unheard of that a board has to run the organization, and that's what they have to do. So this city, Fort Collins, I think you've been hearing from a lot of people, and I know Carson's working on this, but this city is equal in culture to Denver and other cities that are much larger. And FC-PAN is the vehicle to bring that culture to the people, but cannot go forward without a change in the structure and without operating funds. Because the things you're talking about, like you should talk to nonprofits, you say, and get the word out to nonprofits. They cannot do all those things without an operating budget. So I think without that, it's almost impossible to go forward.
Okay. We want to thank the city. We want to thank all of you for being here this evening. Thanks to John McCormick from CenturyLink for being here, and to John Lehman from Comcast for being here as well.